Right. I am starting a new little challenge, which is to read all the books that in the past couple of years I have given 5 stars to. There are only 3, and well, 4, but one of them I literally just read like a couple months back, so I'm not gonna reread it already. But let me show you the books. They are, funnily enough, all right next to each other. There they are. The Vanishing Half, Me and White Supremacy, and Bellies. Right, so like I said, these are the 3 books. The first book I'm gonna read is Me and White Supremacy. I read this book a few years back as part of like the first sort of book club thing I was part of, and the book club literally existed just to read this book. It was around the times of like the BLM protest, the George Floyd thing. So I was reading it at the time because I was already anti-racist, but I was very aware that I was still holding a lot of racist like beliefs and just subconsciously a lot of indoctrinated like racist attitudes of myself, which I think is important. If you want to do work on yourself, you need to recognize that. So this book was amazing. It initially was an Instagram challenge, but then it was so successful that Layla, Saad, decided to make it into a book. It's a very thin book, but it's a very different type of book. It's like a workbook sort of thing. It's split into 4 different parts, and after each part there's like journaling to do, and it's very much designed for you to really actively, it's not a reading it and being like, oh, that was nice. It was very like you actively have to do work on your racism and things like that. And our group back then was actually made up of people from all backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and even the people from a black background actually took things away from this book because it's so indoctrinated and it's so systemic that even black people sometimes hold certain racist viewpoints and things like that, which was very interesting to discuss. But yes, I want to reread it because I think I'm at a different point in my life now. I'm way further along the journey, and I think I will take different things from this book now, so I want to reread it. Then the next book was Bellies. It's a story about a gay couple where one of the 2 decides to transition into becoming a woman. I read it last year as part of our book club. I didn't know about it before, so this was one of the books where I'm like, would have never read this if it wasn't for book club. And it was a pure 5-star read. I love this book so much, and I cannot wait to read it again and actually talk about it. And then The Vanishing Half. So it's a little bit of a cheat, because this book, I actually gave it 4.5 stars. But the reason I gave it 4.5 stars was because I was like, I want more. I want more. Like, I need more. This book could be 600 pages, and I'd be like, more, please, Brit. More. So, yeah. Truly amazing book. I haven't met a single person that didn't love this book. So, very excited to read it. I'm desperately trying to get my new book club to read it. I'm very much like, read this book. It is amazing. You will love it. Especially because we just read The Persians, which is a little bit similar in the setup. Like, this one's also different perspectives of different people throughout different times. And I'm like, this book is so much better. Read this book. It is so good. So in case you couldn't tell, read this book. But yes, very excited to read it again. Very much hoping I can convince my book club to read it, because then I can also read it as part of a book club. But all of these 3 are actually book club reads. So while it is a challenge, it will go into my book club section on the channel, because they are all book club reads, and I was going to talk about them anyway. So very excited to start reading it. Gonna start with Me and White Supremacy, and I've got a little group set up because this is definitely a book that you want to discuss with someone. You don't just want to like sit in your own little room and do the work. No, you want to discuss it with people, see what other people took away from it, and I'm gonna start doing that. I have finished Me and White Supremacy. So obviously, as I've said, I've read it before, but I really wanted to work through it again because it's been a few years since I've done it, and I was really interested to see what I would get from it. And working through it again, I would have to say I probably didn't find it as like much of a change or as inspiring as I found it first time around. Maybe it's because I already knew what it would be about and the themes it would touch on. Maybe because I'm just in a very different place than I was about 5 years ago when I last did it. And I've already made a lot of changes, so some of the topics I felt maybe like I didn't feel I had mastered them, because that's ridiculous, you'll never do that. But I certainly felt like I didn't have as much to say, and I have to say, working through it again, I did find some of the questions at the end of each of the chapters, because I think, as I said in the intro, this isn't like a typical book. So this book is divided into essentially 28 days, and then every day is like about a topic, and then it talks about a topic a little bit, and then at the end of it you've got reflective prompts, which essentially the idea is that you would journal about these things or actively think about them in some way. If journaling is not your thing, you can talk to yourself or things, but journaling is certainly the recommended approach. And I'm still working through this book with some people from my work. We were originally about 5 people, but now some people have bowed out because I think this work isn't for everybody. It's very confronting the first time you work through it, so I think some people just found it quite hard to actually, do the work. And it is hard. You definitely have to be ready to want to do the work. But yeah, so working through it again, I did find some of the questions sometimes a little bit repetitive, and they were just a little bit samey, and sometimes I was like, I feel like I've just said what I would say about this question. But it did certainly bring up some new things there, where maybe certain things aren't as prevalent with me anymore, but other things, like what I've realized, that I still hold a lot of racial stereotypes just because they are constantly being bombarded into me through the media, through, politics and all of that. And it's very hard to just kind of evade it and just be like, oh no, I don't believe that. And you can actively choose to question these things, but it's crazy how much still goes in. It's quite wild. Yeah, so I would probably give this on second read a 4.5, but I would say when I first read it was definitely 5 stars. It really changed my mind a lot. It made me question like the way I was thinking about certain topics. So I would definitely recommend this book if you're ready to really be an anti-racist ally and do the work, and not just, we will talk about this a little bit, just be like an optical ally. Then definitely get this book, work through it, do it quite diligently. I didn't do it this time around like every day. I definitely did do it last time around though. This time around just certain things happened, but I always was like, well, black people don't get a day off from racism, so I shouldn't really be getting a day off from working on my racism. So yeah, but let's dive into it a little bit further. I'm not gonna really do a spoiler section because this isn't a spoiler kind of book. But yeah, there is a quote I also wanted to share with you about wanting to do the work. I think it's this one. Bear with me, I'm just gonna double check. Yeah. And it's about needing to really work through things, essentially. The entitled demand for simple answers allows us to dismiss the information if those answers are not forthcoming. She didn't tell us what to do. This is especially arrogant when the demand is made of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC. This is an acronym she uses a lot. In essence, we're saying, you do all the work and take all the risks, then hand me the fruit of your labor. I will sit back and receive them while taking no personal risk myself. And what happens when we don't like those answers because they're not quick, convenient, or comfortable? When the answers challenge our self-image as open-minded, progressive individuals, free of all racial conditioning. As BIPOC have experienced again and again, when we don't agree with the answers we have demanded, we all too often feel qualified to dismiss them. So I think that's definitely something you should keep in mind when working through this book. It's not going to be all like quick, easy, simple answers, right? It's going to be, it's work. You have to really be open and willing to do the work. And the whole book, she quotes a lot of other famous Black leaders, and it really centers on the idea of her wanting to be a good ancestor, and you should want to be a good ancestor too, and maybe not continue in the damaging narratives that your previous ancestors have left with you. Like I said, we often don't want to do the work if it's too hard. May have and in order to do the work, you will need 3 things: your truth, your love, and your commitment. And only when you have those things will you be able to do this work. There you go. So throughout this book, she talks about a lot of terms. Some of those terms I knew, some of the terms I didn't know when I first came across this book. So I won't talk about all the terms, but I will pick out some that I think are quite important to think about and to talk about. So the first term we should obviously talk about is white supremacy. So white supremacy is a racist ideology that is based upon the belief that white people are superior in many ways to people of other races, and that therefore white people should be dominant over other races. And it also, I should also say that what you receive for your whiteness comes at a steep cost for those who are not white. This may sicken you and cause you to feel guilt, anger, and frustration. But you cannot change your white skin color to stop receiving these privileges, just like BIPOC cannot change their skin color to stop receiving racism. But what you can do is wake up to what is really going on. I invite you to challenge your complicity in this system and work to dismantle it within yourself and the world. This book is very much about doing the work within yourself. It's not designed to tackle structural racism, right? But it's certainly designed to recognize structural racism around you. The second thing we should probably talk about is white privilege, which is actually the first day of the challenge. White privilege is a legislative, systematic, and cultural norm that has existed for a long time. It describes the unearned advantages that are granted because of one's whiteness or ability to pass as white. That's also important to note. It is very important to note that white privilege is not a concept that is part of the natural order of life. In the absence of white supremacy, white privilege is meaningless. And then if sometimes, it might be quite hard when you just get these definitions to be like, what does that mean? I don't understand. What's white privilege? So extract examples of like what white privilege is, for example, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. When I'm told about our national heritage or about civilization, I'm shown that people of my color made it what it is. I can go into a bookshop and count on finding the writing of my race represented, into a supermarket and find the staple foods that fit with my cultural traditions, into a hairdresser's shop and find someone who can deal with my hair. If a traffic cop pulls me over or if the IRS audits my tax return, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. I can be sure that if I need legal or medical help, my race will not work against me. And there are more examples, but these are just some of the examples that are given, and I think that just sometimes really helps to understand how it actually impacts people. But she also talks about the fact that race in that sense is completely a sociological concept. Like, biologically, different races don't actually really exist in that sense. It's very much a sociological concept. Like, the DNA of a black person isn't really different in any way to the DNA of a white person, if that makes sense. So, white fragility. That's, by the way, is not to say that black people might not have certain ways in which maybe they react differently to certain drugs or something like that. White fragility. So white fragility, I think, is quite interesting, and it's quite important to talk about, because white fragility really hones in on the fact that you want to be seen as one of the good people. Like, you are not one of those people, you know. And I think for me as a German, I related very strongly to that, because in Germany, that feeling of, oh, I'm not like them people is very, very strong. To be like, oh, I'm nothing like those people. Those back then, you know, like, no, I'm nothing like them. I'm one of the good people. So it's like racist people, bad people. Not racist people, good people. I want to be a good person, so I cannot be associated with racism. And it stops a lot of people to actually address their own internalized racism, because they go, well, no, I'm not a racist, so I'm fine. I don't need to do the work, if that makes sense. And it's a desire to be seen as good by yourself and by others that prevents you from looking at the ways you unknowingly participate and are part of white supremacy because of your white privilege. And your desire to be seen as good can actually prevent you from doing good, because if you do not see yourself as part of the problem, you cannot be part of the solution. And I think that's really at the root of this book. Like, you have to really recognize yourself as you're not special. You have been conditioned just as everybody else by racist ideas in your life, because it's all around us. It is systemic, right? And I'll talk about this more when I talk about I think othering is the term, but it's, or centering. It's just like, there is no way to evade it. Even if you're the most anti-racist white person in the world, there may still be something within you that holds a little bit of some racist ideas or racist stereotypes or something. And even black people themselves can also hold racial stereotypes, because nobody is safe from this, right? And I think I said in the intro that when I originally worked through this book, we did have some people of different races discussing the book with us and reading the book and working through it. And they found it really enlightening as well. Like, it is definitely meant for white people, but they definitely recognized that some of those ideas, they even embed in themselves, because it's so structural. It's so all around you, right? Yeah. The next topic I want to talk about, which I found quite powerful, was white silence. And it's something that I definitely was very guilty of, and still am guilty of at times. is not speaking up when I recognize racist behavior, racist comments, things like that, and having the privilege not to speak up. So this is a very powerful quote from Martin Luther King. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. And I think Martin Luther King was very, he wrote a lot about this, and I love how people always try and pretend him as the good, calm, he was working with the white people, and he was very calm and blah, and it's like, no, he wasn't. But essentially, I definitely recognize that, for example, not long ago, the CEO of my company, we were doing a EDI sort of call, and he was saying, I don't see color. And in my gut, I was like, and I knew I should have spoken up, but I didn't. My colleague, thankfully, did speak up, and it really kind of made me go, I should have spoken up. She can speak up, why didn't I speak up? And it's like, we have that ability to choose not to speak. So yeah, it's definitely something we need to work on. Then there's also white exceptionalism. And white exceptionalism is really all about the fact that you, as a person holding white privilege, are exempt from the effects, benefits, and conditioning of white supremacy. So it kind of talks again about the fact that you don't believe that you could ever be a racist person. And I have a very powerful quote for this from Martin Luther King. I think it kind of goes together with some of the other themes we've talked about. And this is quite a famous quote of his, so you probably might have heard it before. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the White Citizens' Council or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set a timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And this is a quite famous quote. Yeah, he certainly talks about the fact that, the white moderate is almost more detrimental than an absolute freaking racist, because at least with freaking racists, you know what they are about. They hate you. But the white moderate liberal is sort of like, oh, yes, we do agree with you, but you're not quite doing it in the way we'd like. And actually, can't we just keep things as they are? It's not that bad, is it? So it's like this idea that you have to maintain order, and I find this very interesting because I currently work for a refugee organization, and we have some research showing that a lot of people actually just want to maintain the status quo. But as Martin Luther King recognized, and as even the ultra-racists recognize, you can't maintain the status quo. If you keep maintaining the status quo, nothing changes. The racism is not gonna go anywhere. So you have to make changes. even if those are uncomfortable changes. And I actually would say that while reading this book, I actually realized that a lot of the things raised in this, some of them are very, very closely related to the current climate crisis as well. Like this quote from Martin Luther King could be copied and pasted over with just changing a couple of words and apply to the climate crisis, because this is exactly what the climate crisis is also currently going through, where they're being criticized for that direct action when it's like, man, we're kind of with you, but don't do it like that, and we don't like it. So it's, I think every social justice movement has some of these issues at the root core of it. Right. Yeah, she does talk about a sombering statistic, which I think is quite well known, but that black women in the UK are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white people, and she talks about statistics and facts like that throughout the book, and I always find that so horrible and so sobering to think about. Right. Racist stereotypes. So this is obviously something that I talked about a little bit already and mentioned that it's something that, like, I actually still hold quite well. But what I also think is important, and I had to put my hand up and say, I actually, when I was in school in like 7th grade or something, I made a report about reverse racism, and it came from a good place because I wanted to show how racism creates reverse racism. But what I should have really recognized is that reverse racism doesn't exist in that sense. So here she talks about the fact that all people, regardless of race, can hold some level of prejudice towards people who are not the same race as them. A person of any race can prejudge a person of any other race based on negative racial stereotypes and other factors. Prejudice is wrong, but it's not the same as racism. Racism is the coupling of prejudice with power, where the dominant racial group, which in a white supremacist society is people with white privilege, is able to dominate over all other racial groups and negatively affect all those racial groups at all levels, personally, systematically, and institutionally. I find this quite interesting. Because it does mention that it's the dominant racial group, which obviously in our current world is white people. But I do remember, what was it? Noughts and Crosses. It's a TV show, a British TV show, which essentially reimagined a world where black people were the ruling class. And in that world, black people would have been the people who are making racism happen, essentially, against white people, which was very interesting. So it's always coupled with this power element, essentially. She also talks about cultural appropriation. Obviously, cultural appropriation is always something that I find so difficult, and she does talk about this. Talking about cultural appropriation in today's modern globalized world is always tricky. For one thing, because of advancements in travel technology and widespread use of the internet, we are more culturally connected with one another than we have ever been. This elicits the question of how do we find what culture is, how it is formed, and who owns what. And I think there are very clear examples of cultural appropriation that I'm not even gonna need to talk about. But like there are, I think, examples where it's like almost like it's harder. Like I was raising the example that I saw on TikTok of this little girl who was really she loved I think Mulan, so they made her a Mulan themed birthday party, and they obviously featured a lot of Chinese things and stuff. And some people were like, oh my god, so racist, and some other people, including people of Chinese descent, were like, oh no, this is like, you know, a beautiful way for this young child to learn more about other cultures. So it's like, I find sometimes it's quite tricky and a little bit of a gnarly concept, but it is certainly a massive problem in today's world, and it comes together with Trump's like blackfishing, which is obviously something that happens a lot at the moment. Yeah, there's just a lot of other problems, obviously. So she talks about cultural appropriation showing up in fashion, you know, appropriation of cultural fashion styles, hair, the appropriation of traditionally African hairstyles but owned by non-black people. I know that the whole braid thing, and people are like, white people wore braids, and you're like, yeah, but not those type of braids, Brenda. Sorry to all Brendas. The appropriation of BIPOC physical attributes. So this is the kind of blackfishing we're talking about. Sorry if you can hear my washing machine. As I've said before, my washing machine runs like every day. Sorry. Spirituality and wellness, and I think that's a big one. Like when I originally did it, one of the people who was in my group was a woman who runs her own yoga classes, and she had sort of that moment of like, whoa, I'm really profiting financially of other people's culture. Like, and it like she really struggled with that and really had to unpack a lot about that, because I think a big part of music, obviously, a big part of cultural appropriation is, are you financially profiting of something another culture has actually created? And yeah, I think a lot of people are. And yeah, you might then need to have a bit of a look at that. Yes, let's talk a little bit about, let's say you want to do all this work, and you're like, I want to be a good ally. Like, what makes a good ally? A good ally is an active, consistent and challenging, or allyship is the active, consistent and challenging practice of unlearning and re-evaluating, in which a person of privilege seeks to work in solidarity with a marginalized group. It's not an identity, it is a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency and accountability with marginalized individuals and or groups. Allyship is not self-defined. Our work and our efforts must be recognized by the people we seek to ally ourselves with. I think that's very important. You can't just call yourself an ally and be like, I'm an ally. Like you can, but there's more to it than that. I think there's also something about optical allyship I wanted to actually talk about. I think it's a bit later. Yes, optical allyship on the reverse is an allyship that only serves as the surface level to platform the ally. It makes a statement, but doesn't go beneath the surface, and it's not aimed at breaking away from the systems of power that oppress. I think a famous example of optical allyship was all the black squares on Instagram back in a 2020 time, right? Remember when everybody had like a black square on their Instagram and they were like, I'm such a good ally, and you're like, yeah, are you though? Like, what else are you doing? White apathy is also something I want to talk about, and it's almost like a self-preservation response to protect yourself from having to face the fact that you are literally complicit in the oppression that white supremacy causes. But it's not a neutral thing, you know, by being like, I'm not a bad person, you're still actively harming people. White centering is the thing I was touched on earlier, which is the whole idea of seeing white people as the norm and everybody who's non-white as the other. And this is definitely something that even sometimes black people find themselves faced with, where they realize, oh my god, I'm seeing white people as a norm, right? And definitely white people, I think, most white people, vast majority, I was going to give a percentage, but that's quite hard, but the vast majority of white people have white century in their head. And that's, I think, where sometimes the bigots get really upset when there's like a black Little Mermaid or something, because they're so used to seeing themselves in everything that and white is the norm and the normal, that anything that's non-white is seen as weird and other. And it's very much about the idea that when a creation features mainly white people, it's for everyone. But if it features mainly BIPOC people, it's for BIPOC people. So like, and I think that's also something that definitely I kind of wrestle with, because it's so embedded in me. And coming from Germany, where I lived in Germany, we mainly saw white people. There were not a lot of BIPOC people. The most racially diverse people were Turkish people. We had a lot of Turkish people where I grew up, but there were definitely not a lot of black people, no indigenous people, no Latin people. So it's very, like, I saw white people as the standard. So, and I certainly, like, have kind of felt the, like, if it's got a lot of BIPOC people in it, it's for BIPOC people. Like Black Panther, like, it's for BIPOC people, right? But then you're like, no, it's not. It's for everyone. And I think Black Panther was actually so pivotal in that, because it was definitely for everyone, because it was part of a overall, you know, what you call it, franchise, right? So people couldn't go, oh, it's just, that's the film that's just for the black people, because they were like, well, I have to watch it, because due to Disney's horrible marketing ploy, even though it wasn't that bad back then, it's much worse now, but it's the whole thing of like, you have to watch it or you won't know what's going on anymore. And it was one of the commercially most successful movies ever. So clearly not just black people went to go see it, right? Yeah, I just find that very interesting. And I think there are more things happening now to kind of throw that out of the water. But at the same time, we all know that there is a big movement to be like, no. And then one of the last things I want to talk about is white saviorism, which is quite massive. And I quite like this, because when I read the intro to this chapter, I was like, oh. But I want to read it to you. At the beginning of 2018, during a briefing meeting with lawmakers in the Oval Office discussing the protection of immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, US President Donald Trump asked, "Why do we want all these people from shithole countries coming here?" The question shocked people around the world. But in truth, this comment was reflective of what is often thought, but not overtly said, about BIPOC. The idea that BIPOC countries and people are inferior in worth, capability, intelligence, and self-determination as compared to white-dominated countries, and people with white privilege is a foundational aspect of white supremacy. And this intro was like, when she talked about the shithole, and she was like, it's often thought but not overtly said. I was like, no. But then I was like, actually, you're right. That is literally what people think. And I used to work for an organization that felt a lot like volunteerism and white saviorism, and I felt very uncomfortable with it after a while. I think he's running out of time, but I will be okay. But yes, yeah. So it's like, I think it was very interesting, and it's definitely true. And white people often see themselves as being the saviors, right, of people. I talked about it before when I was talking about The Color Purple, because in that she lives with a young Christian couple who go to Africa to save people, right? But then realizing they don't really want saving, do they? And they were probably better off before the white people arrived. And then the last topic I really want to discuss is white feminism, and it's probably because it's one that is quite discussed at the moment quite a lot. Certain people are certainly heralded as people of white feminism. And it's very much all about the fact that white feminism is broadly defined as an epithet used to describe feminist theories that focus on the struggles of white women without addressing distinct forms of oppression faced by ethnic minority women and women lacking of other privileges. And it's very much about the fact that they're sort of like, no, you have to talk about the gender differences or the sex differences first. You have to take your race out of it. And that's how white feminists see it. And they refuse to address the fact that because of intersectionality, black women face more oppression. For example, black women earn less than white women, that sort of thing. And they refuse to address those differences and those disadvantages that black women, like the maternity health crisis and things like that, are experiencing at also the hands of white women. And I think, you know, J.K. Rowling is certainly a white feminist, though she's not even that feminist in my opinion. And Taylor Swift is also, I think, a very famous white feminist who doesn't really talk about any issues that are not affecting white women. And there's other examples as well. So I just wanted to talk, and Emma Watson actually has a famous quote in here where she talks about the fact that she found it quite confronting talking about white feminism, but then she realized that those weren't the questions she should have been asking about it. She should have been like open to learn, like she was then, but she was like, her initial reaction was like, what do you mean I'm a white feminist, you know? And then realizing that actually, you know, many of these things are actually true and I need to look at it. And I will leave you with a final quote in a moment, but I also want to talk about the fact that if we truly want to become anti-racist allies, we need to look at losing privilege. I know there's always the saying of, it isn't like, you know, you're gonna get a smaller slice of pie, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, you know, we as white people need to look at losing our privilege in order to allow others to gain the privileges they don't have, even though they should. Because there's no way not to do it that way. We have to focus on losing our own privilege and dismantling white supremacy and white privilege that benefits us in order to benefit people who are not of white descent. Also, white descent is bullshit because, as I said, it's a sociological concept. And then I want to leave you with one last quote, which is, I want to speak to the good ancestor who lies within you, the person inside you who came to this book with questions about dismantling white supremacy, and who leaves this book knowing that you are part of the problem, and that you are simultaneously also a part of the answer. There is a great power and responsibility in that knowledge, but knowledge without action is meaningless. And I have to do it. With great power comes great responsibility. But yes, thank you so much for listening to me talk about this book. It's a great book. I love this book so much. So if you're interested in becoming an anti-racist ally, definitely pick this one up and work through it. Maybe with a group of friends or colleagues or whatever, form a book circle. She talks about how to do it at the end of the book, which is kind of a shame because you don't realize it until you get to the end of the book. And then you're like, oh, this is telling me how I should have run my book circle all along. So yeah, definitely do it. Pick it up. It's a great book. And this also means that once I finish my current book club book, I am going to start on The Vanishing Half by Brit, Bennett, which I'm quite excited about. I'm actually not enjoying my current book that I'm reading that much. So I'm quite excited about starting this one because I did love this one last time around. I had a moment where I was like, didn't really want to read it that badly, but now reading a book that I thought I would love and don't love, I'm actually very excited to read a book that I definitely loved again. Baby. You're so sweet like honey. Baby, you're so sweet like honey. Baby, you're so sweet like. Right, I hope you're buckled in and ready for a ride, because we're going to be talking about Vanishing Half, and I'm going to be talking about all of these bookmarks, and I have like 4 pages of notes. So this is going to be a long one, so I hope you got yourself a cup of tea or something, or if you're like me, you might be watching this in bits and pieces, because yeah, it's going to be a long one, because this book is so extraordinary. In case you didn't know, I liked it since I'm rereading my 5-star, and obviously, as always, my washing machine is running, so if you can hear it, I apologize. Right, The Vanishing Half. So obviously I have read it before, and I reread it as me rereading 3 books that I gave 5 stars to. I actually gave this book 4.5 stars, not 5 stars, because I wanted more of it. Like, it could have been 1,000 pages. Do you know what I mean? Like, Brit, this could have been so much longer, and I would have read all of it. No questions asked. So this is why I only got 4.5, because there wasn't enough of it for me. Which, in my head, I guess technically means it's 5 stars, because I craved more of this. Right. So, let me talk in general first. So, obviously, the book itself is about a pair of twins who live in a town called Mallard, where people essentially, I also have a cough, I apologize, but where people essentially purposely try and make themselves lighter through choosing their partners in a way. That way, like, that's not the only reason they choose their partners, but basically the whole town is slowly but surely trying to make itself lighter and lighter, from being just black people. And apparently this is something that actually did happen during those times in the States, due to, you know, racism and all of these things, and a desire of black people to be as little black as possible, so that they wouldn't experience racism as horribly. And in this town, basically, slowly but surely, through generations of people doing this process, they have been able to more and more become lighter people. So much so that Stella and Desiree, the 2 twins in this book, end up leaving, and one of them ends up living as a black woman, whereas the other one ends up living as a white woman, and passing as a white woman. And so the whole book is about essentially their stories, the stories of people connected to them, the sort of their trauma, the impact that their decision has had on them, you know, like just their lives after they leave. Like, the book literally starts with them leaving. I love the way this book is written. Like, the way the book is written, especially in the beginning, like, it's like I can hear Morgan Freeman narrating it in my head. Like, I will read you the first like few lines. The morning one of the lost twins returned to Mallard, Lou Le Bon ran to the diner to break the news. And even now, many years later, everyone remembers the shock of sweaty Lou pushing through the glass doors, chest heaving, neckline darkened with his own effort. The barely awake customers clamored around him, 10 or so, although more would lie and say they had been there too, if only pretend that this once they had witnessed something truly exciting. Like, I don't know, I can hear Morgan Freeman in my head narrating this Shawshank Redemption stuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, the writing itself is just absolutely beautiful. The prose is written extraordinarily. I more than once added 3 bookmarks on a page, which to me always shows that I must clearly really like this book, or I really, really hate it. But mostly it's when I really, really like it. And also, like, it just astounded me, just sometimes how much content Brit Bennett squeezed into, like, say, 2.5 pages. Like, 2.5 pages later, I all of a sudden knew all about what happened to Desiree and all of this and this person and that like, I was like, how do I know all of this within 2.5 pages? Like, it was wild. There's a lot of themes covered in the book, obviously racism, but there's also domestic violence. There is LGBTQ plus themes in the book. There is you know, like family trauma. Just there's a lot of love, romance. There's a lot of themes in the book, and like, I'd say I want more of it, but I never felt like themes weren't, like, explored enough. There was maybe, like, certain stories where I was like, well, I wish I would know more about this. But it never felt to me like things were, like, glossed over, like I have sometimes experienced in other books, like Enter Ghost, for example, where I would find that, oh, it's just very surface level to me, and I needed more of this. Like, it never felt like this to me. Yeah, I mean, all in all, it's just an amazing exploration of family, racism, trauma. It's also told in a very interesting way that I feel like in another book would really bug me, but it does not in this book. So Brit Bennett did something amazing and extraordinary. Basically, the stories are told in flashes. So you dip into this one person's life, and then you sometimes have flashbacks. And then you dip into another person's life, and then you have some flashbacks, and it's like, oh, 20 years later, oh, so they're still together, sort of thing, like, but it never bugged me. Like, I feel like in another book that would have really bugged me, but in this book I just was like, okay, I'm with it. Cool, sounds good. Like, yeah, I don't know, it was just quite extraordinary. I'm about to go into spoilers, because there isn't much more I can say about this book without spoiling anything. But my boy, he's just going. He always does that. He's so vocal, my guinea pig. He goes around his pen and he goes, and when he sleeps, he, like, hoots like an owl. He's like, woo, woo. He rumble struts at inanimate objects. He just goes. And when I pick him up, he will tell me his entire life story all day. So yeah, and then sometimes he just goes. I've never had a piggy like him. Very vocal. Anyways, I'm about to dip into spoilers to tell you more about the incredible people, the incredible stories in this book. So if you don't want to hear spoilers, you should probably leave now. Like I said, this book is extraordinary. It's 4.5 stars. If you yourself have read this book, or if I've made you want to read this book, do drop me a comment, let me know what you think. And yeah, it would be really great. I have not read Brit's other book, but rereading this was like, I have to read that book, man. Because it's, yeah, I love this book so much. It's so good. One of the best books I've ever read. So yeah. Right, so let's go into spoilery territories. So I'm gonna go very much like the way the book went, which may sometimes feel like I'm jumping around, but that's because that's what the book does. So I apologize for that, but I think will allow me to tell this in the most consistent way. So the book starts with Desiree Vignes returning to Mallard after she had left many years ago. Basically her and Stella left with no note, with no nothing, just up and left their mother Agnes. And the book opens with Desiree returning with her own child, Jude, which is a very dark black child. And obviously it kind of creates a rage in Mallard where people are used to very light black people. And people are like, oh my god, who's that child? What is this child? Is that her child? Because I can't be her child. She's so light, sort of thing. And I do have a quote that I wanted to share with you. Oh yeah, I also just wanted to show you, like, this is how it goes. So it just goes part by part, essentially. Right. Now I think I took that bookmark out. But essentially all the town is just like, you know, who is that child? How does Desiree have such a dark child? Yada yada yada. I do have a quote though to kind of just talk about how light they were. So Desiree at one point says that her father had been so light that on a cold morning she could turn his arm over to see the blue of his veins. Now the thing is, and this is quite hard, I should maybe say content warning, but yeah, it's very, that racism, you know, transphobia, you know, domestic violence, like, you know, I said, there's a lot of themes mentioned in this book, so hopefully if this triggers you, please don't keep watching and listening. Please take care of yourself. Feel free to shut it off. And we will go in quite heavy right now because very early on you are told that Desiree and Stella's father was lynched. And this is the quote. So I said her father had been so light that on a cold morning she could turn his arm over to see the blue of his veins. But none of that mattered when the white men came for him. So how could she care about lightness after that? Essentially, some white men came to kill her father because they felt he had, like, cheated them on a piece of work he had done for them. And when they didn't manage to successfully kill him, they came to the hospital he was in and then killed him there. And Stella and Desiree saw the initial killing happening. And obviously it has caused a lot of trauma to them. But it also shows that despite all the efforts in this town to be as light as possible, it's essentially like, you know, in the end, it doesn't matter. You're still dark. It also raises an interesting, what I found very interesting is the different way the twins essentially handled that trauma. Because, like Desiree says, how could she care about lightness after witnessing that? Whereas it seems for Stella, she was more like, I will not be safe until people think I'm white. And that's probably why she ended up passing over. So, yeah. So essentially what you find out is that Desiree and Stella left. They went to New Orleans from their little town in the south where they lived. And then shortly after they arrived, or sometime after they arrived, Stella kind of up and left Desiree without any warning. And from that moment on, Desiree has no more contact with Stella. She doesn't know what happened to Stella. She doesn't know why Stella left. She doesn't, and that again caused her obviously trauma. They were twins. They were very, very close, even though they were not similar. Like Desiree was very outgoing, Stella was very shy, but obviously that's her sister. That's her twin sister. They ran away together, on very much Desiree's sort of behest, and then Stella kind of just left her behind. So that's obviously difficult. And I have a quote here from when Desiree has her daughter Jude, when the nurse tells her it's good luck for a girl to look like her daddy. She smiled a little, offering reassurance to a woman she believed would need it. But Desiree stared into her baby's face, enchanted. A different woman might have been disappointed by how little her own daughter resembled her, but she only felt grateful. The last thing she wanted was to love someone else who looked just like herself. So it kind of shows that has very deeply traumatized her, and she really isn't dealing very well with the fact that Stella kind of just up and left. You find out that Desiree ended up marrying a man she married a man that she fell in love with, but also a man that was very, very dark, because she didn't care any longer about lightness, right? And you find out that her husband Sam starts beating her, he starts abusing her, and that is in the end why she's left him and went back to Mallard. But it's very interesting because it talks about, in a way, the reasons why Sam was being abusive, and a little bit about black trauma during that time. So she says here, a week ago she had watched Sam cry as Walter Conkright delivered the news, holding him on the couch as he trembled in her arms. The shooter was a madman, maybe, or a military operative, or perhaps even an agent in the borough acting on behalf of the government. They were culpable, perhaps complicit Negroes working for the wrong side. That night they made love desperately, a strange way to honor the Reverend, maybe, but she didn't feel like herself that night, overwhelmed by grief over a man she didn't know. So it kind of talks about, in a few instances, how Sam was very, angry and hurt over the racism and the things that were happening, the murder of Martin Luther King, the murder of Malcolm X, the things that were happening to black people, essentially, which obviously isn't an excuse, but I do find it very interesting, and I was like, I want to know more about this, I want to know more about this exploration into the reasons for Sam's behavior. Again, that's why it needs to be 1,000 pages long. And actually, when we were discussing as a book club, other people said the same thing. They were like, it was so interesting how it kind of delved into why Sam was the way he was as well. So essentially, she leaves him because he attacks her very brutally, and she's scared for her life. And she then goes back to her mother, Agnes, who, Agnes is an interesting character. She's very strict and stern, but she's also very clearly loving. So I've got some quotes for that. So first there's a quote about Desiree being like, oh, maybe it wasn't too late, it'd only been gone 2 days. She could always call Sam, tell him she made a mistake. She needed a little time to clear her head, that's all. Of course she had never seriously meant to leave. So it kind of shows how she's wrestling with her decision to leave Sam, which is also explored quite nicely. I always enjoy when that sort of scenario is explored quite nicely. I really like in Big Little Lies how domestic violence is explored in that as well. Like, it's not clean cut. It's not like he abuses you, leave him. It's like there's so much emotion and love and you know, it's just difficult. It's a complicated situation, right? Her mother pushed a plate toward her again. What type of trouble you were in? Desiree forced a laugh. There's no trouble, Mama. I ain't stupid. You think I don't know you running from that man of yours? Desiree stared down at the table, her eyes welling up. Her mother poured milk onto the cornbread and mushed with a fork, the way Desiree had eaten it as a girl. He gone now, her mother said. Eat your cornbread. So, like, that's kind of how Agnes is. She's, like, quite, quite stern, but also loving in her own way. Yeah. Just, a really lovely woman. You really like her at the end. You also love, yeah, and you also it's also explored a little bit how tough it must have been on Agnes, losing both her children, well, her husband, and then both her children in one sort of fell sweep almost. It's very hard. You then meet Early. Early is a man who works as a bounty hunter sort of person. He tracks down people, PI sort of style, but like not officially sort of thing. And you find out that when he was young, he sort of had a little bit of a love with Desiree, and essentially, yeah, is being told that he has to find Desiree for Sam. So yeah, he was a farmhand in Mallard for a summer, and he courted Desiree. But then some water. But then Agnes caught them, so to say, and he left and never came back, essentially. But you very quickly get the feeling that he has always loved her. And it's kind of almost described as like fate, that he would obviously be the one to have to find her. You find out that he goes to Mallard. He obviously knows immediately where she's gone. They end up in a relationship very closely. There is a little quote of that. Like, the book does skip ahead quite a bit. Sorry, I'm just trying. Yeah. So he keeps obviously going to go and do his job and find people, but then he always comes back to her. Once she was carrying a country-fried steak and eggs to a table and found Early sitting at the end of the counter, chewing on a toothpick. Another time she looked up the diner and turned to see Early leaning against a phone booth across the road. She was exhausted, but still laughed at the sight of him, as unexpected as the sudden coming of spring. Sorry, my voice keeps going. It's because I'm still a little bit ill. I was just thinking about you, he'd say, as if he had stopped by on his way home, not driven all the way from Charleston, pressing on through the night, bleary-eyed, to get to her sooner, wondering what he was up to. So yeah, they developed this quite beautiful sort of relationship. It's quite an unconventional relationship for the time, because they're not married, because obviously she's still married, but they just keep being together and being a couple. So yeah, it's quite beautiful. He basically hides that he's found her from Sam, and also promises to help her find Stella, and that's also sometimes where he goes. We then move on to an adult Jude, an 18-year-old Jude, who's going to college in LA, and that's also kind of what I was talking about, where you kind of find things, because you're kind of left. You leave Desiree, and then you hear you're Jude, and Jude says, flipping through a warm detective novel that her mother's boyfriend had given her for her 17th birthday. And then you're like, oh, so they're still together. Okay. Like, it's just sort of like, just mentioned like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's no big deal. But yeah, so Jude is going to LA for uni. She talks a little bit about what it was like for her growing up in Mallard, being obviously a very, very dark person in a town obsessed with being lighter. And I've got some quotes for that, and again, quite racist, so please be careful. They called her Tar Baby, Midnight, Darky, Mud Pie. Said, smile, we can't see you. Said, you so dark you blend into the chalkboard. Said, bet you could show up naked to a funeral. Bet lightning bugs follow you in the daytime. Bet when you swim it look like oil. And she basically recounts how she tells other people about that. At that party, she forced herself to laugh, even though she found nothing funny at the time. The jokes were true. She was black. Blue black. So black she looked purple. Black as coffee, asphalt, outer space. Black as the beginning and the end of the world. They talk a little bit about her family tried to like make her lighter and also make her not get any darker. And it says she would get no darker, although she seemed to the longer she lived in Mallard. A black dot in the school pictures, a dark speck on the pews at Sunday Mass, a shadow lingering on the riverbank while the other children swam. So black that you could see nothing but her. A fly in milk, contaminating everything. So yeah. It's quite clear that those that it was quite difficult for her dealing with obviously the racism she experienced while living in Mallard. Racism basically by other black people, but yeah, it was very, very hard to her. We find out that she was bullied by a boy quite badly, but that boy then also initiated a secret relationship with her. Not a very nice relationship, but it's like you can just see that she had no self-worth, and she felt like, oh, that guy wants me. You know, the only person who apparently doesn't completely despise my appearance and who I am. So she basically starts a relationship with him. There's also quite a little bit of exploration of how she felt as the child when Desiree left her father. She missed him already, even though she could still see that bruise on her mother's neck, even though she could remember all the bruises she had seen on her body over time, dark splotches on that strange topography. Once at a swimming pool, she had stared as her mother started to change in the stall before stopping midway when she discovered a fading bruise on her thigh. She quietly put her clothes back on, then told Jude she had decided to sit by the pool today and watch her. When they arrived home, her father greeted her mother with a kiss, and Jude realized that if she tried, she could pretend bruises came from somewhere else. Her relationship with one parent magically untethered to the other. And somebody basically asks her about her real mama, because she obviously can't be Desiree's, and she goes, I don't know, somewhere, I haven't found her yet. She was thinking somehow of Stella, a woman who resembled her just as little, but who would be a better version of her mother. Stella wouldn't make Daddy so angry that he beat on her. She wouldn't wake Jude in the middle of the night and force her into a train to a little town where other children taunted her. She would keep her word. Stella wouldn't promise that they would leave Mallard again and again, only to stay. And then she remembers talking to her father, saying, "You gotta watch your mama. She's still like those folks." What folks? The folks she come from. Your mama still got some of that in her. She thinks she's better than us. She didn't understand exactly what he meant, but she liked being part of an us. People thought being one of a kind made you special. No, it just made you lonely. What was special was belonging with someone else. So yeah, it was really, really interesting reading that exploration of Jude, kind of, and how she experienced the abuse and the conflict inside of her from loving her father and loving her mother, and understanding that her father was being abusive to her mother, but also not wanting to really realize that. Yeah, obviously we find out that Desiree stayed in Mallard, even though she kept promising Jude to leave. And you find out that Desiree is quite ashamed that she keeps promising Jude to leave, but it kind of feels like that's all she can do. You find out that she takes over the diner that she started waitressing in when the proprietor retires. And then when Jude is in LA, she meets a boy named Reese. We then find out that Reese is trans. And we find that out in quite a stark way, because it's just a sort of a chapter right after they met. On the road from El Dorado, Teresa Ann Carter became Reese. He cut his hair in Plano, hacking off inches in a truck stop bathroom with a stolen hunting knife. Outside of Abilene, he bought a blue madras shirt and a leather belt with a silver stallion buckle. The shirt he still wore, the buckle he had pawned in El Paso when he ran out of money, but mentioned wistfully, still feeling its weight hanging at his waist. In Socorro, he began wrapping his chest in a white bandage, and by Las Cruces he had learned to walk again, legs wide, shoulders square. He told himself that it was safer to hitchhike this way, but the truth was that he had always been Reese. By Tucson, it was Therese who felt like a costume. How real was a person if you could chat her in 1,000 miles? So yeah, that's how you find out that Reese is a trans man. And I found that quite amazing, that little line of how real is a person if you can chat them so quickly. And also like acknowledging that Reese has always known that he's a man. I very much loved the way that that Reese being a trans man was handled in this book. He tells Jude actually quite quickly that he is trans. They become quite close. They have a very close friendship, although it's becoming quite clear that Jude definitely wants more than that, and she thinks Reese does too, but he doesn't. It's like he's friend-zoning her a little bit. She starts living with him as well. He doesn't quite like want to move into a relationship space, and they end up having a fight when she sees Reese struggling with bandaging his chest and like the bruises from it, and she's like, just don't do it. And Reese reacts very badly to it, and Jude leaves. And then there's basically a lovely little bit where they where Reese comes to Jude, where to the friend of Jude's and Reese's where she's staying after they had their fight. And Reese tells her he wants to have an operation, a vasectomy. So Jude says, I'm sorry too, she said. I just don't want you to hurt. I didn't mean, I don't even know. I wasn't trying to act like I'm somebody special. Don't say that, he said. Say what? It was quite a moment. Then he leaned in and kissed her. By the time she realized it, he was already pulling away. That you're not special to me, he said. And this is the first time he kisses her, and you are very much like... And this is funnily enough, because I often am like, oh my god, I hate romance. But actually, no, I like romance. Like, I was reading this, I was like, oh, I'm so happy. Like, I like romance, but it has to be good romance. Like, I love this. Give me more of this. Like, their whole romance was very... loved it. Made me happy. So they do end up in a relationship. And they struggle, and there's like the first time they essentially sleep together during a blackout. Somewhere across the vast city, a grandmother listened to children tell ghost stories in front of a black television screen. A man sat on his porch petting a dog's graying muzzle. A dark-haired woman lit a candle in her kitchen, staring out at her swimming pool. A young man and a young woman walked home, climbing the silent steps, shutting the door on the rest of the city. She held his lighter as he searched the cabinet for candles. He couldn't find any, and they both felt relieved. She wasn't afraid of the dog. He felt safer inside of it. It's just done so beautifully. But they both, so they do have a relationship, but they do have some struggles because of Reese's body dysmorphia. So there's, for example, here, when he tugged off her pajamas, she reached for his belt and he squirmed away. Don't, he said softly, and she froze, not knowing what to do. Lonnie, who's the guy that she was with, that was bullying her, but then was with her, Lonnie had never been shy about what he had wanted, shoving her hand down his boxers, pushing her face towards his lap. But there were rules to loving Reese, and over time she learned them. Lights off, no undressing him. She could touch his stomach or arms, but never his chest, his thighs, but not between them. She wanted to touch him as freely as he touched her, but she never complained. And there's also a little bit of her talking about how she feels like she's not good enough still. Even now, at Venice Beach, she pictured sunbathers laughing as soon as she tucked off her shirt, snickering at Reese too, wondering what on earth is he doing with that black thing. There's another instance where she asks if they could turn on the light, and he goes, why? And she says, because I want to see you. And then he says, I don't want you to, and then he kind of goes to sleep on the couch. So yeah, there's just these, that's like a theme that they're kind of struggling because of Reese's body dysmorphia due to being trans. You find out that Reese used to be a sex worker as well, which again is very typical for trans people. And he essentially found safety with a drag queen named Barry, and Barry's friends who are also all drag queens, and they are all just cis men who just like dressing up. And there's a nice little quote for when they meet, where you need people, he said. Too big a city to be out here by yourself. You need a place to stay? Oh, don't look at me like that. I don't want nobody who don't want me. I'm asking you if you need a place to sleep. What, you too good for my couch? And then they talk about him being a drag queen. And then Barry says, you are a transactional. Where did that come from? You are a transsexual. I know exactly what you are. Reese had never heard the word before. He hadn't even known that there was a word to describe him. He must have looked surprised because Barry laughed. I know plenty of boys like you. Of course, they all get better haircuts. You do this yourself? And then basically, him and Barry developed this really like close relationship, and Reese kind of finds belonging in this LGBTQ plus community, and Jude also very much finds friends there and love there. So yeah, it's very beautiful. At the very end of Jude's section of the book, there is basically it ends with her being a caterer at a party, and she set her empty glass on the bar, not Jude, the person she was serving, and started towards the entrance where a woman had just walked in. Mr. Hardison was helping her out of her fur coat, and when she turned, passing a hand through her dark hair, the bottle of wine shattered on the floor. And I was like, oh, what a great ending to a chapter. But basically you find out that Jude saw Stella, who obviously she immediately recognized because she looks just like her mother. And you then go into Stella's part of the book. You find out that Stella is married to a white man, still passing for white. She lives sort of in like a gated community sort of thing. She has a daughter named Kennedy. And at the very start of her chapter, you find out that in their little community, which is obviously all white rich people, black. What are you doing? He's like tossing a little hay thing. He's like, meh, meh. He's being loud. Right, where was I? So yeah, you find out that in Stella's community, essentially, a black family wants to buy a house, and Stella herself is very vehemently against that. And you basically realize that the reason she is so against it is sort of because she's afraid that she's going to be found out. And there's some quotes I have. Stella wouldn't even hire colored help for the house. She claimed Mexicans worked harder. He never understood why she averted her gaze when an old Negro woman shuffled past them on a sidewalk, why she was always so curt with the elevator operators. She was so jumpy around Negroes. Apologize for the wording. Like a child who has been hit by a dog. But yeah, essentially she's very much anti them moving in. She's like sort of fighting against them moving in, but then they kind of do move in. The black man is like a famous TV star, so everybody kind of accepts it. And the Stella, it's essentially the house opposite Stella's, and Stella's child Kennedy and the Walker's child, Cindy, start playing together. She also kind of, but Sarah then kind of starts, like, forbids them from playing with each other. But then she kind of starts up a friendship with Loretta, until she gets confronted by a neighbor, and sort of friend, who kind of is like, oh, you're spending a lot of time with her, blah, 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 blah. And that's, I think, when Stella realizes that maybe she's treading quite a dangerous line there. Kennedy then also ends up calling Loretta's child the N-word. And there is some, like, tension that comes out from that. And then Stella says that she feels quite uncomfortable around Ray, which is the husband of Loretta, knowing exactly what those words will do in her community. And it's very interesting because I have some quotes. Blake, her husband, essentially sees himself as quite a liberal man, not racist in any way. They had the colored help and they were younger, sort of thing. And they're talking about some of the protests that were going on. I'll never understand why they do that, he said. Destroy their own neighborhood. So this is about black people, obviously, protesting, destroying things, blah, blah, blah. And then Stella kind of talks about the way those protests are making her feel. Tom Pearson and Dale Johansson and Percy White wouldn't storm a colored man's porch and yank him out of his kitchen, wouldn't stomp his hands, wouldn't shoot him 5 times. These were fine people. Good people who donated to charities and winced at newsreels of Southern sheriffs swinging billy clubs at colored college students. They thought King was an impressive speaker, maybe even agreed with some of his ideas. They wouldn't have sent a bullet into his head. They might even have cried at watching his funeral. That poor young family. But they still wouldn't have allowed the man to move into their neighborhood. So she's like, she thinks she has a pretty good grasp on the people around her. But she does say she couldn't tell what unnerved her more, picturing a colored family moving in or imagining what might be done to stop them. And then when she ends up sort of basically, so what happens is he kind of helps her with her groceries. He says, there you go, he said. He didn't even look at her. But a week after Christmas, sitting around her sewing circle, she told Kath Johansson and Betsy Robertson that he made her uncomfortable. I don't know, she said, plucking at her misplaced stitch. I just never liked the way he looked at me. And Kath Johansson was the woman who essentially called her out for spending so much time with Loretta. So she's kind of trying to regain her capital. 3 days later, someone threw a brick through the Walker's living room window, shattering that tiled vase Loretta had bought in Morocco. Tom Pearson and Dale Johansson both claimed credit, although it was neither of them. Instead, Stella discovered later it was beat-faced Percy White. And then basically the Walkers end up moving out because it's becoming too dangerous for them to stay there. And then Stella kind of talks about truth, because she knew that if it came down to her word versus Loretta's, she would always be believed. And knowing this, she felt, for the first time, truly white. So yeah. This is kind of Stella's life. We then go back to Jude. We find out that she's still with Reese. She's working in a Chinese restaurant trying to earn money because Reese wants to have top surgery, and he's saving up for it, but he keeps like dipping into his savings because like the car engine needs fixing, things like that. And Jude is kind of working multiple jobs so that she can also help Reese, but she doesn't really tell them that. And she also ends up realizing she wants to go to med school. And she finds that out because she's kind of doing a lot of research and support for Reese. And she realizes that she really enjoys it, so she ends up like pursuing that as a career. You find out she still thinks all the time about seeing Stella, about what to do about it, whether it means anything, and what should happen. Should she tell her mother about it? That sort of thing. And through a pure coincidence, there's a few coincidences in this book where you're like her seeing Stella in the first place. But basically, through a pure coincidence, she sees Kennedy in a musical that she's in, that Barry is also in. And she starts kind of becoming obsessed with Kennedy and Stella. She starts following them, kind of striking up a friendship with them. You find out that Stella is now a professor and she kind of wants to pursue a master's degree in maths, but Blake is very much like, why are you trying to be a career woman? Like, this is not the woman I married a housewife sort of thing. She's also very close with a very feminist, strong woman. But I found it very interesting because she's obviously a white feminist, and I have a quote for that. Which is obviously interesting because Stella is not white. Peggy's girls were all white, and when Stella asked once if there were any Negro women in the group, Peg prickled. They have their own concerns, you know, she said, but they're welcome to join the fight. So, you know, you kind of can see that, yes, she's a great feminist, but also she's obviously not very inclusive. Jude doesn't really understand how Stella could have just sort of abandoned her family in the way she did. Like, she sort of understands Stella wanting to pass over, especially with her being so black. She kind of understands wanting to pass. Who didn't dream of leaving herself behind and starting over as someone new? But how could she kill the people who had loved her? How could she leave the people who still longed for her years later and never even look back? That was the part that Jude could never understand. And then she talks a little bit about Kennedy as well. She felt defensive when Barry called her, Kennedy, a spoiled brat. Even though she was one. Of course she was. The girl was maddening sometimes, but maybe this was who Jude would have been if her mother hadn't married a dark man. In this other life, the twins passed over together. Her mother married a white man, and now she slipped out of mink coats at fancy parties, not waited tables in a country diner. In this reality, Jude was fair and beautiful. So it's kind of showing, again, Jude still not feeling very worthy, but also like that constant thinking about, like, this is who I could have been sort of thing. Yeah. She ends up meeting Stella, who comes to the musical, and telling Stella who she is. And Stella doesn't react very well, kind of just runs off. And then she ends up telling Kennedy, when Kennedy kind of mocks her for being like, she doesn't understand why Reese is still with Jude, because Reese is too attractive for her, sort of thing. Kennedy then kind of confronts her mother. but nothing much comes of that. They kind of keep it as a secret between them. But you do find out that Candy kind of always knew that her mother had like a secret or was a liar. So there is a essentially Kennedy kind of confronts her mother when she's quite young about like where she grew up, and her mother says in Opelousas. But then Kennedy goes, no, that's not where you told me you grew up. You told me it was a town, something with M. And then her mother is like, oh, you must have remembered wrong. You were still a baby. Her mother stepped forward to kick behind her, smoothed on the top and edges. Come here, honey. Want to lick the spoon? This was the first time Kennedy realized her mother was a liar. So it's kind of like, even Kennedy knew from a very young age that her mother had a secret and was lying about something. So when Jude tells her the truth, it probably made a lot of sense to Kennedy and kind of finally made her go, oh my god, that's what it's been. Kennedy also ends up getting a black boyfriend, and living in New York. And when Stella kind of questions her about her boyfriend and whether that's maybe because of what she now knows, if dating friends had been some type of experience, then had failed terribly. Loving a black man only made her feel whiter than before. So that's, I thought, very interesting. They then end up meeting Jude and Reese again, who are also in New York, again, through a coincidence. Which, yeah, this book has a few coincidences where I'm like, would that have happened though? I don't know. Like, but I guess maybe it's in a way trying to show that these people were always drawn together. And it's talking about, again, about Kennedy being surprised that they're together. She knew his type. Painfully handsome, and it wasn't the type to love a girl like Jude. Sure, she was striking in her own way, but a pretty boy like him would never fall for a girl who was difficultly beautiful. And they then kind of, like, Jude tells her that she's going to medical school, and Kennedy says, in spite of herself, she felt a little proud. Jude was living the life she said she wanted years ago, still loved by the same man, on her way to becoming a doctor. And what did Kennedy have to show for all that time? A basement apartment with a man she barely understood, no college degree, a job serving coffee so that she could belt out songs in a half-empty theater each night. But then basically her and you find out that Jude and Reese are there for Reese's top surgery, and Jude and Candy kind of connect, but they don't stay in touch. But there's some interesting bits about them connecting. Hold on. And essentially, Jude giving Kennedy a photograph, because after Jude told Kennedy the truth, they weren't really together. Like, the relationship just ended. So this is the first time they meet each other again, and Jude's kind of like, I've been wanting to give this to you. And it's a photograph. The photograph was old, grey and faded, but still, under the fluorescent light, she could tell which of these identical girls was her mother. She looked uncomfortable, like if she could have, she would have run right out of the frame. Her mother had always hated taking pictures. She hated being nailed down in one place. Yeah, and they then kind of speak to each other a little bit more about it. It occurred to Kennedy then that if she suddenly had a heart attack right here in the hospital lobby, Jude would be her nearest relative. Cousins. They were cousins. But if Jude told the nurse this, insisting on the right to visit, who would ever believe her? And it's kind of like her realizing that she's part black as well. And she talks about the fact that since that incident with Cindy, the daughter of Loretta, she had never used the N-word before. And then she says she had never said the word again, not in passing, not repeating jokes, not until Franz asked her to in bed. It was like a game, he told her, stroking her back, because he knew she didn't mean it. Which I thought was very interesting, that he apparently wanted to call his white girlfriend to call him by the N-word. But yeah, then there's an interesting, I meant to say this, an interesting moment of like, Jude talking about Mallard and her saying, awful, she said. They're only like light Negroes out there. You'd fit right in. She said it so offhandedly that Kennedy almost didn't realize it. I'm not a Negro, she said. Jude laughed again, this time uneasily. Well, your mother is, she said. So that makes you one too. Doesn't make me anything, she said. My father's white, you know, and you don't get to show me up and tell me who I am. And it's very interesting, kind of creates a little bit of a crisis of identity for Kelly. I just pushed over my water bottle. Look, she was being cute. Look at that mouth. She's the cutest guinea pig ever. You are, aren't you? Cutest guinea pig ever. Look, world, Freya world. Come on, my girl. Right. We are getting to the end. So now I have hate ever. Life with bunnies and piggies. Kennedy then becomes a soap opera star. And she kind of starts using the trauma from like not really knowing who she is. And she says she like starts making up stories. All the stories she knew were fiction, so she began to create new ones. She was the daughter of a doctor, an actor, a baseball player. She was taking a break from medical school. She had a boyfriend back home named Reese. She was white, she was black. She became a new person as soon as she crossed the border. She was always inventing her life. So she kind of talks about how she constantly kind of changes who she is. You then find out that Agnes, the twins' mother, has dementia, and that Desiree and Early are taking care of her. And that just was a part of the book that absolutely broke me. And I have a quote for it. Each morning, Desiree combed her hair, or if she had to get too loose, Early did. She had taught him how to braid one afternoon, demonstrating with pieces of yarn. He had practiced again and again, amazed that his fingers were capable of anything so delicate. He liked the mornings when he braided Adele's hair. She only allowed him to because she was forgetting. And he could forget too that she wasn't his mother. Oh, it's going to be going again. And they go fishing, and she says, are you my son? No, ma'am, he said. No, she repeated, I don't have any sons. Which at that point, yeah. You're not my husband, are you? No, ma'am. I don't have one of those either. I'm just your Early, he said. That's all I am. Early? She laughed suddenly. What type of a full name is that? The only full name I got. I know who you are, she said. You that farm boy always hanging around Desiree. He touched the end of her grey braid. That's right, he said. That's exactly right. Just the whole relationship between Early and Agnes is just kills me. And then Stella comes back to Mallard and realizes that her mother has dementia. Her mother had lost her mind. Stella realized this slowly as she followed her down the narrow hallway to the kitchen, where a strange man unloaded fish from an icebox. All the time she imagined what her mother might say if she came home. She would be angry, might even slap her across the face. She had never pictured this. Her mother, a shell of herself, bustling around the kitchen as if the only thing in her mind was fixing dinner. As indifferent to Stella as if she had been gone 25 minutes, not years. The strange man following after her, picking up a knife after she had set it down, keeping her away from the stove, finally convincing her to have a seat at the table while he made her a cup of coffee. So yeah, Stella visits Mallard, visits Desiree, but she then just leaves again and decides to go back to her life, go back to the life she's been living for far longer than the life she originally lived. Which I guess isn't what you wanted, but in the end, I guess it's what makes the most sense. Agnes does pass away, and Reese and Jude are told about it. And Jude kind of remembers talking to her grandma about dying. And also there is a lovely little scene with Reese. At home, Reese stirred soup over the stove. He was shirtless, barefoot in jeans. He was always shirtless these days. You would have thought they were living in a cabana in Miami, not freezing in the north. Because you find out that Jude did get into medical school in Minnesota, and that actually Reese broke up with her when she got into medical school because he didn't think that they could stay together, that they could be a couple. That year, the first snow had arrived earlier than she had expected. Tiny flurries falling on Halloween. She was thinking about her cowboy sitting on the couch in that crowded party, and again tried not to cry. But that night she found him outside her apartment door, in a black knit cap, covered in snowflakes, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. "God damn," he said. "I'm so goddamn stupid sometimes. You know that?" So basically, yeah, they stay together, and Agnes passes away. And there's a really beautiful quote on how Jude is dealing with it. Her death hit in waves, not a flood, but water lapping steadily at her ankles. You could drown in 2 inches of water. Maybe grief was the same. She goes back home with Reese. She's not allowed to sleep in a bed with Reese, even though they've been sleeping in a bed together since she was 18, basically. And her mother very much considers, like, they accept him. They don't know that he's trans. Jude hasn't told them that. And her mother told Reese that she considered him a son, wedding or not, but she hoped at least that he wouldn't make her wait forever to become a grandmother. I'm not saying it has to be now, her mother was saying. I know you're all both busy, but someday, that's all, before I'm old and grey and can hardly move around. You would make a good daddy, don't you think? It was quite a minute. I hope so, he said. And there's also the heartbreaking moment from before Agnes passed away, when she started calling Desiree Stella. How could her mother forget her? The daughter who had lived with her for the past 20 years. The one who cooked her meals, eased her into the bathtub, slowly administered her pills. Dr. Brenner said that was the nature of the disease. The fast stuff, they remember, he said. Nobody knows why. It's like they're living their lives backwards. Where did you go, Stella? Agnes asked once. Nowhere, Mama, she said. She wouldn't look at her. I've been here the whole time. You did, Adele said. You went somewhere. But she couldn't think of where. Stella climbed into bed with her, wrapping her arms around her. No, she said. I never left. But yes, so Jude and Reese go back to Mallard for the funeral, and kind of just have a lovely moment after the funeral of just the two of them being together. There is a moment in the book where it's clearly in like older Jude reflecting back on her experiences, but you don't know, is she still with Reese, which infuriated me. I wanted to know. But this is why I want this book to be like 1,000 pages, and go all the way. But yeah, this is kind of how the book ends, with Reese and Jude just taking a moment in Mallard, remembering Agnes, Stella living as a white woman, and Desiree living her life as a black woman in Mallard, the town she was so desperate to escape, but in which she has now lived most of her life, with a man who loves her deeply. And that's A Vanishing Half. And yeah, it's an amazing book. I love it. I can only recommend it to people. It is extraordinary. It's beautiful. Read it. It's beautifully written. It's got some amazing themes. Some people don't like it as much as I do, but everybody I have ever met would still agree that it's a great book. So, read it. Until next time. And yeah, if you want to let me know what you thought about it, do just leave me a comment, like I said earlier in the video. If you've read it, if you've loved it, if you've hated it, please let me know. I'm really interested, and I'd love to chat more to you about the book, because I could talk about this book for hours, literally. Oh, I was just thinking, she's probably blocking my mic, but this is Freya. Mwah. Isn't she the cutest? Look at that face. Look at that face. So Freya and I are here to talk to you. You're probably like mucking up my mic, Freya. I apologize if she does. I'll put it back now. Whoop. Let me check. But anyways, Freya and I are here to talk to you about Bellies. I finished reading it. Obviously, it's part of my rereading books that I've previously given 5 stars to. So in case you didn't know, this is a 5-star book, and it is still a 5-star book. I adore this book, and it is a book I would have never read if it wasn't for book club. So join a book club, because you find amazing books like Bellies. Feels like I'm really close to the camera. So just to talk a little bit about plot. I think I did an intro, but let's talk about it again. This book is about two, I'm gonna say people. Two people, Ming and Tom. Ming and Tom meet at a drag night, and they fall in love. and enter a gay relationship. But then throughout their relationship, Ming realizes that they are trans, or at least comes out as trans. And essentially, it's about how that affects their relationship, how they navigate that, and what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who has come out, and what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who was attracted to somebody that was different to who you are now. And it's a stunningly beautiful book. I want to say before I forget that I will be using pronouns throughout. So Ming is a trans woman, but I will be using he, him pronouns for the part up until she transitions, just for clarity and because that's what the book does as well. But obviously, she's always been a trans woman, so it should really be she, her throughout. Yeah, I love this book. Like sometimes I read books and I'm like, I really hate these people. They're so unlikable. And then people are like, oh, but perfect people don't exist. And this is the kind of book that reminds me, I don't mind flawed people. Like both Ming and Tom are beautiful, gracious, loving beings, but they're also selfish and jealous, and that they have bad traits as well, possessive and things like that. But I still love them both. Like they're amazing, beautiful, and real. They're really real. So yeah, that's just, yeah, they have genuine love for each other, and that's just so beautiful. I should say at this point that the book is told from both of their perspectives. So I'm gonna lower my camera. I feel like I'm too high. Hold on. Yeah, that feels better. It felt a bit like I was looking up into God's beautiful eyes or something. But yeah, so it's told from Ming and Tom's perspective, interchangeably. So you kind of get both of their headspaces, which I think is amazing. Because you, like I said, you get this isn't the person, well, for both of them, this isn't the person I fall in love with sort of thing, but also like how they each feel about it and navigate it, and it's just really beautiful. It's beautifully written. I thought I had made like special quotes just about that, but I don't think I did, in the end. But hopefully it will come out in some of the obviously many quotes I'm going to be reading. But it's like quite lyrical, but at the same time it's very like direct. I don't know how to describe it. It's beautifully lyrically, but then very direct. Hopefully it will come out in some of the quotes. Before I get into spoiler territory, I'll talk about the fact that it's kind of hard on like when does it get into spoiler territory, because a big part of the plot straight from the off, which is that Ming decides to transition into a trans woman. So that's like not a spoiler, I guess, in that sense. So I guess you can judge for yourself if you feel that when I'm gonna go into spoilers, which is gonna be more like what actually happens in the book, I suppose, whether you feel that that's a spoiler or not. Up to you. But yeah, so basically both Ming and Rob, both Ming and Tom have friends that also support them throughout their life. At uni, by the way, this very much takes place in uni and then post uni. So Tom has a best friend called Rob that he met at uni, who's a northern guy who I love so much. He's like, he plays, I think, rugby. Like he's a really like alpha kind of bro, but he's also like incredibly like open. He like really loves like physical affection and is really physically affectionate with all of his brothers. Like he's just the type of man that somebody should be. Like he's a manly man, but he's also like vulnerable and emotional. And that's just, he's so beautiful. I love him. And he also has Sarah, who he actually was in a relationship with, but then broke up with her because he was gay. And then she got a girlfriend. So I suppose she was like, wait, maybe this is me too. Yeah, but they become really good friends with Sarah's new girlfriend as well. And then Ming has his flatmate Cass that he's really close to, as well as his family, which his family is just, I'm going to talk more about it in the spoilers, but his dad, sorry, I should have said Ming is from Malaysia. And his dad and his family still live in Malaysia. But his dad, obviously being gay in Malaysia is a big sort of no-no, but his dad is just so accepting. But again, not perfectly. Like he's not, with open arms and blah, 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 blah. He's more like, he's quite a gruff guy and he has his own faults and stuff. But he does support his son slash daughter this entire life. So yeah. Oh, I have a quote. There are a couple of quotes before I get into spoilers, just because I want to kind of set the scene. So, as I mentioned, Tom and Ming meet at a party. Oh, I do have an example of the kind of writing. Let's go to bed, he said. His fingers gripped the switch of the lamp and clicked us into darkness. We shuffled deeper beneath the duvet, and I fell into a dreamless sleep. And then it's like, and then it says, the glass of beer I had set down was still there. A hairline rim of bubbles ran along the edge of the beer's surface, neither popping nor dissolving, held in stasis. A gust of wind blew through the window and across my cheek. It hit the glass, and the bubbles began to wobble. This is what I mean, like, it's like quite direct, like, let's go to bed, but then it's like, a gust of wind blew, and you're a bit like, ooh, like it's, I honestly have never come across a writing style like this before. I don't know, I put quote here, but I don't think I have a quote. Oh, okay, yeah. So obviously they meet at a drag party. And they end up walking through the streets after, and they come across these men who are like in these really tight tops, like skinny jeans, really bulked up guys. And Ming says, it's interesting, isn't it? Ming said. Like, they kind of got harassed by them. Like, he was in just as much drag as I was. It's the horseshoe theory for gender. They probably mix their drinks with Armani code. And I was like, that's actually like so insightful and so true as well. So I really like that. And also I've got some quotes because Tom, throughout his life, has very much battled with being gay. So this is after they've slept together the first time. Afterwards, as I lay breathless on top of Ming, a feeling bubbled beneath his stupid smile on my face. The cousin of that fear from the summer, and the dance floor with Ming. The summer is when he had a sexual encounter with another man. It was stronger than with the banker or that other boy, and I knew this time that it was more than the aching joints of shame-filled youth. I didn't want any more bankers or boys on old ladies' couches. So I really, really like that. And there's another one down here where Tom says, back then at parties, I would make drunk and idle conversation over kitchen islands, while boys and girls hooked up in upstairs bedrooms and helped clear empty cups and cans without being asked. Teachers said I was I can't say this word, conscientious and sensible, because there wasn't room for me to be much else. And I just thought that was very beautiful on him being gay. There's also a very, very early sign, like here already of Ming feeling uncomfortable in his body and having body dysmorphia. So this is when they met at a drag party. And Tom said, "Do you think you'll do drag again?" he asked. I lifted my head and lay down next to him. "I don't know," I said. "I didn't like it. Will you?" He shut his eyes and yawned, one hand holding mine and the other over his chest. "Yeah," he said. "I feel more confident in my body when I do it." So it's just these like very early signs. I think I've got another one from when they were together on holiday in Malaysia. This is from Tom's. I feel like I should say from his perspective. I feel like when I read the quote, but this is from Tom's perspective. He hung onto the edge of the pool with his elbows. I noticed the flecks of black on his chin as I paddled closer. My torso touched the towel next to him. "You've got more stubble than normal," I said. He rubbed at it as if it were a stain. "I have to shave every day in Malaysia. It's something about the heat." I pulled my finger along the rough skin. He gently waved my hand away. "You hardly have any, though. You could just try to grow it out." "I don't want to," he said. I've actually been thinking of getting it lasered." And then he kind of talks about why you can't just shave, basically. He also, before I go into spoilers, has OCD, likely brought on by probably his body dysmorphia. So I've got some quotes with that. I feel a twitch in my calf and then in my eye. I panic. "I'm dying." I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to say this. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, more commonly known as ALS. Do I have ALS? Oh my god, I have fucking ALS, don't I? I give in and open my laptop and head to the forums. Is 21 too young to have ALS? Yes, it's very unlikely. A bit of relief. Is the twitching in my leg ALS? It's a very rare disease. It's very unlikely. More relief. Does lasering facial hair increase likelihood of ALS? No results. Okay. Youngest person ever to have ALS? 8. Fuck. The cycle starts again, and I'm researching and researching through a hamster wheel of improbability and death. This is what I do instead of studying. This is also a good quote. It's combining his OCD and his body dysmorphia. I rub my hands over my face. It's smooth, but I can feel a few follicles burgeoning, some resistance, like running over sparse hooks of Velcro. This sends another pang of unease through me. I start to cry. The world feels too much. Booking another session feels like too much, even if it makes me happy. I think that is it. So like I said, I adore this book. I love this book. Read this book, especially if you want to find out more about trans people. If you've read this book or if you want to read this book, do let me know in the comments. Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. When we read it in book club, not many people read it, which I thought was interesting on its own. My book club was very white feminist book club, if you know what I mean. But the few people that did, some of them felt like it was trauma porn, and I was like, didn't get that at all. So yeah, I would really appreciate any perspectives that you might have, what you think about this book. If you've read it, if it's on your list, like, let me know. And don't forget to subscribe as well. It really means so much to me when people subscribe. I don't have many subscribers, sadly. So when people subscribe, I literally see it and I will do a happy dance. So please subscribe. Right, I'm going to pause this video and then I'm gonna stretch because I have a weird thingy in my back, and then I will do the spoilers. Hello. So regarding sort of spoilers, some of it I've kind of already mentioned. So for example, Tom and Ming enter into a relationship. and at uni, and they end up going to Malaysia together because Ming invites Tom to go to Malaysia together. Um, and obviously in Malaysia they cannot be openly gay, so they kind of have to pretend like they're just friends, even though pretty much all of Ming's friends know that he is gay. Hold on. Right. I was recording and my mic wasn't on apparently. So all this amazing brilliance that I just said is just gone, which includes a quote, but I'm kind of gonna re-say the quote. But I was talking about Ming and Tom in Malaysia, the fact that they couldn't really be a couple in that sense. And then I was talking about the fact that this is when I need my notes. Tom's parents are very, very wealthy. And Ming quite frequently calls it out. And Tom, there is this lovely scene basically where Tom, for after uni, starts interviewing with these finance jobs, and Ming is like lying there, listening to him talk about his interviews, looking above Tom and seeing capitalist realism on the bookshelf, and he's like, the cognitive dissonance amazes me, like, because Tom throughout the book is very like sort of socialist, liberal, blah blah blah. And there's another quote about Tom's parents. Tom's parents were as confused as I was by his job. They spent years nodding along to Tom's Fisher-Price socialism, but stop short whenever Tom mentions a wealth tax. Yes, tax the millionaires. No, not our kind of millionaires, not the accidental property millionaire. They'll be the first to bury their cordless Dyson in the back garden when the class war erupts and the purges begin. So he kind of, and he does, like Ming himself is also quite wealthy. Like his dad is quite wealthy. So it's not like Ming is really flagging like, "Hi, I'm poor. You're rich. Like, what are you doing?" But it's very much like Ming is more aware, I think, of his privilege, and like he's not necessarily, he's not a socialist kind of guy, but he's very much like, this money is great. I like it, sort of thing. Like he's much more real about it. Whereas Tom is very much like socialism, liberal, which I think a lot of us were in university. And actually, when they make him become a finance guy, I'm like, this feels wrong. Like, why is he a finance guy? But actually, I think it's quite real of a lot of people who hold these views in uni, but then they get into the real world and they realize, to make money, you kind of have to go into these type of jobs. And I think it's actually quite a real thing, so I didn't mind it all that much. God, my hair is so horrible. I'm growing it out. Anyways, so Tom starts. Oh yeah, the one thing I should have talked about this before I got into the spoilers, but when Tom and Ming first meet, Tom very much feels like on the back foot a little bit because he feels like Ming is this like gorgeous, confident person, knows what he wants, knows who he wants, and Tom feels much more almost like a virgin, even though he's not a virgin. But actually, as they go on, it becomes very clear that actually Ming is extremely vulnerable and almost a bit codependent. So I've got some quotes about that. I'm scared, Tom, I say. I can come over. I'll bring my revision notes. Are you sure? Your last exam's tomorrow. Silence on the line. I'll see you in a bit, he says. I love you. I love you too. And then there is, so they do this thing where they do the Meisner technique. So if you're an actor, you know what a Meisner technique is probably, but the Meisner technique is essentially you sit opposite a person and you just kind of go smiling, and then that person goes, I'm smiling. And then you kind of just repeat it over and over until you notice something new, like you're frowning, and then you go, I'm frowning, you're frowning, blah, 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 blah. So they do this Meisner technique to kind of calm Ming down. And Ming says, we carry on with the Meisner technique for a long time. I try not to think about how it's Tom's last exam tomorrow. For the first time this evening, I am out of my own head. I wonder how what to do comes so easily to Tom. So it's they are almost a bit codependent on each other, which is um, quite it's quite hard to read. It's because you feel so much for Ming, you know why he's feeling like this, but at the same time you're like, poor Tom is kind of having to sort of keep being there for Ming and hold his hand when he's struggling. So it's you feel for both of them in this book, and I think that's what this book does so brilliantly, that you are on both of their heads and you are feeling for both of them and you see both of their perspectives as well. So Tom starts working for a finance firm, and Ming slowly but surely starts changing his appearance. So he goes lasering, and like Tom feels quite conflicted about all these changes that Ming is making, and I have a quote for that. Are you sure you're fine with me not having any facial hair? Yes. Are you fine with me shaving my legs? Sure. Are you fine with the longer hair? Of course. It was always, are you fine with, and not, do you prefer? And I was grateful, because it meant that I didn't have to lie. Small preferences didn't matter. Attraction ebbed and flowed. Preferences adjusted. Why would we be having as much sex in my parents' house anyway? Because they're living with Tom's parents at this point. And he essentially meets this guy, Jason. He meets this guy called Jason, who's this like very muscly gym bro kind of guy, very like sort of guy, and Tom finds himself quite attracted to that, probably partially because Ming is becoming more and more feminine. There is a part of me who's like, Tom, you're queer. How did you not realize what was happening? Anyways, it's fine, you know. Um, um, there's a lovely quote here from Tom, actually, where it says, "How flimsy is the self if cut away by steel scissors." Um, and I was like, it's so true, because like it also applies to the trans experience, like how flimsy. And I've read quotes like this before. It's like how it was in Vanishing Half, actually, which is the previous book. There was a lovely quote about how strong is yourself if you're able to shed it over how many miles it was that his name Reese traveled. Um, and I think those are very poignant quotes. So yeah, so Tom starts feeling really attracted to Jason. They end up sort of flirting quite a bit, and eventually Tom at a work event ends up cheating on Ming, having essentially or letting Jason perform oral sex on him, and he basically immediately felt absolutely horrified about what he's done, which I thought was quite nice. He immediately goes and runs to tell Ming, and uh, Ming obviously feels extremely hurt by it, but then also I think both of them realize that both of them carry part of why this happened, um, and that they had grown apart quite a bit. So then Ming tells Tom that she's trans, and this is when I'm going to start using she pronouns. And basically, Tom is like having this massive aha moment of like, oh my god, that's why everything has been happening. And obviously, this is not to say that if somebody decides to transition or to start to transition, that is an excuse to cheat on them. I'm just saying that I think they both felt that their relationship had been growing apart more and more, and they were having less and less sex, and they were just not as close as they had been, because both of them felt that there was something that was like pushing them apart, and they didn't know what it was. Well, Ming knew what it was, but Tom was like, what is this thing? I don't feel as close to Ming. I think it's actually mentioned throughout the book that he felt like Ming was keeping something from him. So when Tom finally realizes what it is, I think he actually feels a massive sense of relief. He does decide to stay with Ming because he's in love with Ming, and basically supports her in his transition, her transition. My apologies, but he does also clearly struggle with transitioning, and I have some quotes for that. And this is part of why this book is so great. I need to put these elsewhere. They're gonna fall down. I need my notes because my ADHD, I will just start going off and forget half of what I wanted to say. Okay. I feel like I have some quotes from Ming and some quotes from Tom. Okay, maybe this is all from Ming. Okay, this is mostly all from Ming. So Ming is saying, I feel stupid for saying this, but all I ever wanted was a boy to fix me, Ming said. It's all I thought about growing up, that somehow I'd meet someone and then I'd feel okay, you know? And I met you and I fell in love and life was better. But something's still wrong with me and I've been too scared to say it until now. Which is essentially when she tells Tom that she's trans. And then as she's transitioning, she says, Tom's a master at this. Being the good guy without actually being the good guy. It's the way he phrases things. He can't mask his discomfort. Are you sure you're comfortable? I just want to make sure you're comfortable with your doctors. It's nothing to do with trans stuff. I just think you look better in those overalls than in that dress. It's just a personal preference, I guess. You don't have to dress feminine to be beautiful. That's what happens when you keep mum about what you want. He's an overfilled tub affair. Liquid seeps out. I don't want to let this go. They're essentially talking about detransitioning at this point. And Tom is like talking about, oh, have you heard about detransitioning and this new documentary? But then Ming also says, sometimes, despite his occasional shittiness, deep down I know Tom lets me get away with murder. He always has. And him staying with me through my transition feels like I'm taking the piss. 10 months into HRT and he's still reminding me of shit admin I'd never think to do. He sits with me at doctor's appointments. He tells me when my tuck looks off in jeans. The least I could do was see a therapist. And Ming starts seeing a therapist. I think there's one more quote I have. Oh no. But yeah, so I think both Ming and Tom struggle quite a bit with Ming transitioning into a trans woman, and Tom being really a gay man. So being attracted to men, but loving Ming and wanting to make it work. And I think it's very beautifully done where they talk about like him wanting to make it work, but also how it's quite difficult because your sexual attraction is your sexual attraction, right? And Tom is attracted to men. And he can't exactly force himself into being attracted to women as well, if that's not what he's into. He's certainly tried that before, hasn't he? So yeah, you can certainly feel how they're both struggling with this and how they're both trying to work through it and still be this amazing love that they had when they met. Ming starts doing theater with Lisa. So they both do. Sorry, I've got a light on and I can see it in my window, and I keep thinking somebody's out there. But yeah, so Ming does theater with Lisa. They do a show called Death and Drag, which is all about Ming being gay, and it's very successful. And then because it was so successful, Lisa kind of goes, I think it was so successful because it was real, because it was about our real experiences. Because Lisa obviously is also gay. And then she suggests that Ming does a play about being trans. And Ming is sort of like, no, but then keeps thinking about it. He goes to a support group, and he just keeps thinking about it. Would it be weird if I played myself? What could Lisa do? Would there be sex? Um, she just, sorry, um, just really thinks about this play. Like it's in her, and she keeps thinking about it. And she also talks about the support group. I've got a quote here. I surveyed a room from the side and note once more how most of the people at support group have fallen into the great regression. The involuntary rewind of speech and behavior when a person transitions. The deep psychological urge to relive youth with prejudice and which prejudice and self-loathing stole from them. Let me say that again. The deep psychological urge to relive youth, which prejudice and self-loathing stole from them. They're trans in the psychosomatic sense, but also trans in that they're teenagers stuck in the bodies of adults. Which I thought was very interesting, because I think that's definitely something that trans people experience a lot, where they're trying to reclaim, and I think gay people experience this as well, but they're trying to sort of reclaim what's been stolen from them almost. Da, 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 yeah, Ming realizes that he basically, through his transitioning, oh my god, this is harder than I thought. Maybe I should have used she, her pronouns from the beginning. Ming realized that she is pushing Tom further and further away from her during doing her transitioning, and she says, this is them at the party together. And she says, and then I'm dancing with my eyes closed. And then Tom comes out of nowhere and holds my hand. And we dance together and we sway, and I feel safe again. And I realize I take any medication forever just to have someone hold me like this. And then I remember I'm doing the opposite. So it's like she realizes that what she's doing is driving Tom further and further away from her. And they do end up breaking up because Tom is really struggling with sexual attraction to Ming, the more and more feminine she becomes. So they end up basically both saying we deserve better. We shouldn't feel like, we have to make it work so hard. So they break up. And Ming decides to write the play called Thin Frames about her experience transitioning, her experiences with Tom. Tom ends up in a new relationship with a photographer called Marco, but he's a bit of a dick. And he ends up going to see the play, actually. And I've got a quote for that. 2 quotes. And this is basically a scene where Ming had just started crying. And it's like a whole scene about her trying to have this like corner shop voice that she has, which is essentially trying to be like womanly and feminine. But it didn't completely work. And she says, everyone started laughing. The cashier, the people behind us. She laughed with the rest of the shop. And when I got home, I cried. Because essentially what happens was she spoke with this corner shop voice, but then the receipt was wrong, and then she like went back into her natural octave and went, what the fuck? Which is something that obviously played for comic effect a lot in films, but this is more like a real experience. And then Tom says, I remembered the ice cream. I remembered how before she started crying, she had taken off the skirt she was wearing and thrown it across the room, and how, as I held her, I couldn't help but acknowledge that part of me had hoped she'd never put it back on, that she'd take some trousers from my side of the wardrobe, bin the hormones, and just go back to before. And that's actually something comes out quite a bit. That Tom like just wishes she would just go back to before. And I like you can feel like, oh my god, that's transphobic, but it's just real. That's how it is if you love somebody who is changing themselves in that way. But then he basically says that he feels that the male part in the play, that his perspective wasn't really at all acknowledged, unlike in this book. There was no exposition of his difficulty, his grief. What about the things worth showing? The things I went through, the things that made George me. Fuck Ming. All that ever mattered to her was that she had something to write about. And I thought that was really profound and really amazing. And then he says to Marco, when they talk about it, hey Marco, imagine if somebody's vision of happiness was moving away from the version of themselves you loved. Pretty weird, yeah? Pretty fucking weird. Also pretty weird to profit from someone's pain and humiliation. So weird. And essentially they don't speak to each other. Ming ends up moving to New York to do a master's there. And she says she got into Columbia, which is miraculous, especially with the grades she applied with, because she essentially flunked her degree. People at Columbia have years-long professional repertoires of boring stuff everyone loves, laden with existential pain, but pointless as a queef. Sometimes I think I got in because I'm trans. A trans woman of color. Triple jackpot in the hierarchy of oppression. The all-cis administration board probably couldn't have cared less that I don't face most of it. I'm privileged to shit. And again, this is like showing that Ming is so aware that she probably gets advantages because of who she is, but sometimes she's like, I shouldn't, like, I'm privileged. Like, I don't, like, she's privileged, she can have access to private HRT, she can have access to private. She's privileged in that her father pays, I don't know if I have a quote for that, but she talks about it quite a lot, that she basically begged her father for the money to do the degree, and her father had to remortgage his house and everything, but he did it. So she feels a lot of guilt over that, but at the same time doesn't really. Like, Ming is very selfish in parts, which is so real. Again, I just love these characters. But she also has a moment where she is going down the stairs towards the subway, and a person bumps into her, and the guy says, sorry dude, he says. He doesn't look back. I feel a sting in my chest. I walk down the steps, swipe my subway card, and walk towards the platform. And then it's like, I can't stop thinking about it. Was his intention to say something gender neutral? It's a no. So I run through all the things Alina told me to do when something like this happens. Don't assume his state of mind. He didn't even see my face. I'm dressed in this loose jumper. I'm already tall and I'm wearing heels. The same could happen to a cis woman after all. It's not you, it's him. You can look trans and look beautiful. And then it kind of just keeps going and going. And yeah, she thinks about doing a play, which I was like, oh my god. She thinks about doing a play about a trans woman with dementia. And like that, basically, if this trans woman has dementia, there will be a point where she doesn't remember that she's a trans woman, and she's gonna look down at her body and be like, fuck. Um, so I thought that was like so profound. Um, yeah. Um, it's weird to think that one day someone will have to explain to me that I used to be a boy, but that I've become an old lady. I wonder if there'll be anyone there to explain it at all. So Ming is also very aware that she pushes people away. Then there is, oh my god, I'm gonna have to stop this and then talk about Cindy. Hold on. I just never have enough space on my phone. Anyways, so then now I want to talk about Cindy. Cindy and Rob are like my two favorite people in this whole book. So Cindy is Ming's dad's like step wife, so Ming's stepmother. I was like trying to make it too complicated. So she's Ming's stepmother. And she's often described like very like wearing her Gucci glasses, and she's like she loves her stuff, but she's like so loving and stuff. So she comes to New York I think she went to visit her sister, and then she comes by to see Ming, and they go dress shopping, and they go pizza eating, and she dabs the surface of the slice with a napkin, for which I'm grateful. So much oil, she says, can die. Actually doesn't speak perfect English, and then they like pick out clothing or dresses. We go to a consignment store, and Ming puts on a vintage Alexander McQueen gown. I would literally never wear this. Why would I wear this? Cindy sips me into it. I look at my reflection. I look absurd, but also very pretty. Cindy claps. The shop assistant beams with rehearsed awe. See, Cindy says, holding up her phone to take a picture. Like an actress. I don't let her buy me the dress. It's too expensive, even if it's a good price. She sends the picture to my dad. She shows me his response. Beautiful. Which again, I love Ming's dad. Like, he's not perfect. Like, he calls Ming Michael, which is like what he wanted to call Ming. And then Ming was called Ming by Ming's mother, who passed away at a young age. But he's not perfect about it, but he does support his daughter. I try to think if he's all called me beautiful. It feels like the first time. I know beauty isn't supposed to mean all that much, but sometimes it means a lot. I think I've got more. They talk about Ming's friends and whether she has any friends. Um, and Ming says, I think I'm just enjoying a fresh start and meeting new people. I have good friends here, like Bunting. Yes, like Bunting. Okay, she says, dabbing her face with her napkin. It's good you have Bunny, but you can only have fresh starts so many times. Good to remember, la. And I'm like, I just love the fact that she just called her Bunny, and like that's just who she is. And she's just quite wise. And there's another beautiful quote actually, where she says, I have to see where I'm starting it from. So Cindy is very into like mythical stuff and things. Sorry, I'm gonna have to try and work out where to read this from. Oh, Cynthia is Cindy's older sister, and Cynthia went to pay respects to the goddess of mercy at temple in Ipoh on the way to Penang. Anyway, they know the Sifu, so my sister asked me for your time and date of birth. Why would she do that? To give to the Sifu, la? She says expirated. Sorry if I don't say the last bit right. She says exasperated. Like, all of this is extremely obvious. I told my sister you were stressed. I didn't tell her the reason, but it was about the time you said you wanted to transit. It's transition. The Sifu consulted her book of life. What's the book of life? Ah, yeah. I don't know if it's called that, but it has lots of shorts, and she uses it to determine your path of life, okay? Anyway, the Sifu said, why are you worried about this person? This person is a girl, and when she figures out who she is, she will be very successful. She's very lucky. Don't spend your time worrying about her. Worry about yourself. Since then, I don't worry about you. Cindy smiles, and her posture relaxes. And then I'm going to keep reading it. Your sister told her that I'm trans, I ask. No, she says. My sister didn't know about you being trans at the time, but Sifu told her that you are a girl. Not even that you're trans, just that you are a girl. But my sister took it to mean that you're trans. Afterwards, she sat me down and began to lecture me. Cindy, Ming is a girl. You must accept her. Only then can she be successful. And then she says, Ming told me already. I thought you would be the one to accept her. See, people can surprise you. And then, sorry, this is like going on. And then Ming says, did you tell my dad about all of this? Of course, she says. You know your father, La. He's not into this kind of thing, just like you. But even then, he was smiling, big, and laughing. I know it made him happy. I could see him very much less. Amazing, huh? Yeah, I just love Cindy. She's just so kind and so, like, bubbly and so sort of like, she's just this random friend that you have that, like, always says the right things, but it's like but all over the place. And yeah, it's just really, really beautiful. um we're gonna get into sad stuff now. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Like, Cindy is amazing, and now we're gonna get into the sad stuff. So the next big thing that happens in the book is that Rob has a traffic accident and unfortunately passes away, which I was quite impacted by, actually. I did cry. And it's basically about how Tom deals with this, how Ming deals with this, because obviously Ming and Rob were quite good friends. Ming remembering the last time they met, um, and what Rob said to her, because Rob was very upset about Thin Frames, the play that Ming wrote. And Ming says, look, Rob, you don't know our relationship, and that's fine, but this isn't about you. You have to back off, okay? Like, fuck, I don't, Rob said, leaning back on the bench. Just because you're trans doesn't give you a free pass, all right? Like, you can do whatever you want and fold it into your journey or whatever. Oh, fuck off. Nobody's saying me being trans gives me a free pass. You fucking act like it, he pointed at me. Psychotic, narcissistic behavior. That's a bit transphobic, isn't it? Amelia ventured. Amelia is another dinner party guest. And then Ming says, it wasn't transphobic, but the table fell into deep stillness. A blue, pink, and white bear had walked into the room, ready to maul. I have the right to turn trauma into art, I muttered, the words feeling emptier out loud than in my head. Oh, come on, that's so pretentious, Rob laughed and rolled his eyes. You think you're some fucking Sally Rooney, do you? Sally Rooney trans, Jamie asked. So yeah, they basically did not have a very good last interaction before he passed away, because Rob was best friends with Tom and he was very upset about how much the play hurt Tom. Um, um, and Ming is really struggling with the fact that, because she really liked Tom and that she essentially ended up in such a bad place with him, but also acknowledging that she was probably being quite selfish in writing the play. And I think she called Tom and was like, "Are you okay with it?" And Tom was like, "Okay," but like it wasn't really a proper like consent consultation sort of thing. And then Ming ends up going to London. Her dad pays for it, as always, because he's amazing. And she goes to the funeral, and Tom basically says, I knew that I wanted you here and that it made sense for you to come, but I don't know why, Ming. There's so much we haven't spoken about. There's so much I've been angry about, but I just really wanted you here. Relief and guilt sweeps towards me in a wave. I get up from the chair and approach him. I place my hand on his back, and as I lean down, he comes up and hugs me, pressing my body close. Familiarity of his frame pains me, and this makes me wonder how familiar my own body is to him. I know this is the kind of narcissistic shit that Rob accused me of. Yeah. And they essentially end up kind of making up. Like, there's obviously still so much pain between the two of them because of the decisions that were made and things like that. But Ming says, I'm sorry that you felt used, I say. I'm sorry that I used you, rather. I think deep down, I always thought you'd be fine. That out of the two of us, you were going to come out on top, you know? Come out on top? How? Finding love again is going to be easy for you, despite whatever happened with Marco. Men who want to fuck me are scared of that fact. Sometimes I think that I transitioned into loneliness, and I wonder if I had been better off denying myself what I wanted, if it meant not being alone. I can't even go home, Tom. You know that. Which has been mentioned before, the fact that Ming can't go home because of her trans identity, obviously. Um, you don't know how badly I want to go home to just be with my dad or to watch TV with Cindy. My dad tries to talk about the future, like where he'll live, but I shut it down. I can't even face it. I'm not going to have all the things which are easy for everyone else, the things that matter. Um, And then Tom acknowledges that sometimes I think there's something wrong with me. I only seem to be able to love people who need me. My parents, you, Rob, even. Rob. You didn't talk to anyone else like you spoke to me. I think you would have just bottled stuff up otherwise. And I thought you needed me too, and when you didn't, things changed and we fell out of love. Um, um, and then they end up going to the funeral, and basically Ming goes into, I think it's a church, and she goes to sit down in the back, but then I walk to the back of the church towards Lisa, Cass, and Tom's parents, but someone grips my hand from behind. It's Tom. Please, he says. I let Tom lead me into one of the front pews. Sarah and I flank him. Oh god, this is gonna get me going. I was very upset about this. And it's just beautifully described. And then Tom does a little speech and he says, I've been thinking about how the trunks of trees bend and curve when they grow next to each other. Their leaves twist to accommodate each other. Their closeness reads on the shape of them, and you can infer the shape of one from the shape of another. When you know someone and you grow together, your shape and form become theirs. And so, even though Rob is gone and there'll never be another Rob, another friend I've known as well, or as closely, the impression his life left on me will always be there, and in that sense, we haven't lost him at all. And then they go back to the house, and there's like a wake, and then Ming ends up like hiding in Tom's closet, and Tom finds her, and they kind of sit together in the closet until it's time to go for them, essentially. Um, oh no, it's Rob's bedroom. Sorry, So they go into Rob's bedroom and they are there until essentially it's time to go. So that's the end of the book, essentially. Tom and Ming sort of acknowledging each other's pain and that they were both culpable in the end of their relationship. And oh god, using the pain of losing a loved one to reconnect a little bit, but knowing it will never be like it was. And not just love this book so much. It's full of these flawed characters, these flawed relationships that are real and beautiful and authentic. And I can only 100% recommend this book to anyone. It's not even just about the whole trans thing. Like, it's not a book you want to read because you're a trans activist or whatever. It's just a book about relationships, I think, because you can replace Ming being trans with anything, right? So I think you should read it. And I'm going to leave you with a final quote, which is when they essentially say goodbye. "You're smiling," he says. I'm confused for a moment, and then I understand. I'm smiling. You're smiling. I'm smiling.